Hey good people, Batavia here. We have a full garden tour. I'm so excited. So we're in the backyard now, but we're gonna start in the front yard and then we'll pick up things back here. There's so much to show you. This is probably the beginning. This is my second favorite time. Spring at the very beginning is my favorite time, but right now when everything has been planted and the garden is about to just start to burst, harvests are about to start picking up. We're just, I don't know, maybe about a month and a half before preservation time really kicks into full steam. So there'll be a lot of these things that I'm preserving for enjoyment all throughout the year. So all of that is starting to pick up, and yeah, it's a good time. Feeling really good about the layout, about the plants, about everything I'm growing this year. I'd love to hear from you all. Tell me what you're growing. Tell me how things are going. All right, let's dig in. So the front yard, it's changing every season, and I love it more and more every season. I've had two visions of specifically the front yard fence line, and somehow this year I've combined them both. So it's pretty flowers and food, right? I want both of those things to kind of spill out of the fence. So I have my favorite garden container is that black rectangle container. I have scarlet runner beans in that, and then I have 3 varieties of cucumbers. And the intention here is for them to climb this trellis I've created using this galvanized welded wire. I use it all throughout the garden, one of my favorite kind of non-garden tools that works in the garden wonderfully. So I use zip ties and bungee cords to connect it to the fence. And I will be encouraging, really training the cucumbers to crawl up the trellis. You know, they're not like pole beans. They just don't naturally climb, so they just need a little bit of encouragement. So the same wire that I use in front is what I use to create a trellis for this small bed. And we just have to say a garden prayer, I think. You know, the sunflowers are big and bold, but this winter squash is just really struggling. I direct sowed this, and winter squash takes a long time to produce. The squash need to ripen on the vine, and I'm just not convinced I have enough time in the season. I know it seems early, but we're gonna let it continue to do its thing and be hopeful. Contender bush beans. You know, they're just some things I can't get enough of. And watching beans grow is probably one of those. I actually have been keeping closer track on timing for a lot of these veggies. This was 6 weeks from seed, sowing the seed, to actually the beginning of the harvest. It's okay, so yeah, this is a smile in my voice you hear. So this structure was designed to prevent squirrels from getting to the ripe tomatoes. And it worked really well in the backyard garden last year, so I am absolutely super hopeful and optimistic it'll be effective this year. I have a few different varieties of tomatoes here. We do 2 Determinate varieties, San Marzano and Roma on the end. Intention with those are, since they are going to produce a determined amount of tomatoes, I'll be able to harvest the tomatoes basically starting in, late July, August, and then about the end of August they start to peter out. So that gives me a chance to pull those plants if I like and replace them with some fall crops. Next up I have 3 indeterminate varieties, and this is a little bit different because for the indeterminates, they will produce until sickness kills them or the cold weather. But the question becomes, what's that production like once you get into the later bit of summer going into fall for here in Chicago? So we'll talk about that a little bit more as the season progresses. But I have Cherokee Purple, followed by Bonny Best, which is an old time Z type, Red Slicer. I've not grown that one before. But then I have my favorite, Pineapple. So I needed to come back in the next couple of days and do a real heavy pruning of these tomato plants. I'm a few weeks late on this, and my pepper plants are suffering because of it. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I came in and pruned the bottom foot of the Roma and the San Marzano, being careful not to take off any of the suckers that will ultimately produce tomatoes. I was a little bit more liberal when it came to pruning my indeterminates, just because they can withstand it, and I wanted to make sure I had some real good airflow. This is actually going back to my neighbor's landscaper who told me I should have like 3 plants in this space versus the 5, and he's not wrong. But this is just the way that I've been growing to try to get a little bit more diversity in what I'm planting. And sometimes there is a little bit of the plant suffering for it, but we try to manage through it. So current day Batavia is back with the pruned raised bed. So I know it looks like just still a bunch of leaves, but great improvements have been made. My indeterminate varieties, which are these 3 plants, I went actually higher than I normally would. Again, trying to manage them being so closely planted and making sure that I have some good airflow. Anywhere you can really see like the light of day is where there's been an improvement. So you can see sun getting through more so now. And of course, we have a better look and better access to our tomatoes. Now, the casualty here isn't the tomatoes, they'll be fine. It's actually the pepper plants. So this is a really good example of what happens when a plant doesn't get enough sun. These plants will get this height, and that's fine. But look how thin these branches are, right? So they're essentially leggy while they're planted, which is unfortunate. I really want pepper plants to be more like this. So stout and bushy as it grows up is better for the plant, because if you think about this branch, when these 2 or 3 or 4 peppers put on, they're going to start leaning, bending this branch over. So what I'll do is keep a closer eye on these, and I'll likely add some more staking, which isn't normally necessary for my pepper plants beyond these cages, but we do what we need to do. And so the lesson here is to have pruned those tomatoes earlier before they started taking over the pepper plants. Also, my initial plan was to have these pepper plants just a little bit closer to the edge of the bed, but when I put the onions here, I wanted to give the onions room to grow. But all in all, we'll have tomatoes, we'll have peppers. We'll just have to put a little bit more work into it. I have 2 types of okra, a smaller variety, those 2 plants in the front, which should make it easier for me to get to them just from kind of the walkway. And then I have the Clemson spineless, which is going to grow to be tall with the goal of harvesting them from the porch. So my okra production has been pretty poor the last couple of years. I have a neighbor that I have wanted to gift okra, and I've just not really been able to do that, but I think this is the year that we all will be able to enjoy okra. So our potatoes, we have a few different plantings. This is one using the Ruth Stout method. It's a take on it. So the soil line is there, and then I have mulch, and I'm using straw here. And so I've come in once to add an additional layer of straw as it compresses and starts to break down a little bit. This is about, I don't know, from fingertip to wrist, maybe about 6 inches. I don't want the sun to ever hit the potatoes, so that's the reason why we'll make sure we cover those potatoes that are growing basically between the soil line and the mulch. Pulled our first round of garlic, and I've updated the structure, basically creating a twin bed, if you will. I had originally been growing in 4 fire pits, so the 2 that are sitting on top, they used to be back there where that kind of landscape timber bed is. And so we're growing tomatoes in that space now. We have a different structure set up. But it's one of those weird things where you have a design in mind, it works, but then you change it, and what do you do with that material? So I think this is actually a pretty good use of it. In addition to being able to grow things like potatoes there, I'll be planting for fall in a bit, and I can actually use this setup to put plastic over it, creating kind of a circular cold frame, or more like a low tunnel, and I can continue to harvest based on what I plant for, you know, fall going into winter, hopefully. So if I feel like something works in my garden, you'll see me repeat it over and over. And that's what I've done here. So the same type of structure we have in that first large bed, I'm using it here, and I have tomatoes growing again. So the struggle with plants back here is that they're on the side of the porch. So like this chocolate sprinkle, dark star tomato, these are new varieties for me, and I won't get the full feel of them growing and what they can produce because these plants are a little bit sun starved. They will produce, but they won't produce like the tomatoes that are in that first bed because it gets the full enjoyment of all the sun. It doesn't get sunny here until closer to 10 a.m. So, you know, it's doesn't mean I can't grow here. It's just being conscious of what I'm growing here and knowing that the production may be impacted by what I'm growing and when, right? You know, so that's fine though. We have a couple more tomatoes here. Another Roma and another San Marzano, since I had so many of those. And plus I last year did not preserve many diced tomatoes. I don't know how I missed that, but my hope is that between the paste tomatoes, you know, your Romas and your San Marzanos are much easier to dice and can since there's less liquid and more meat to the tomatoes. So I'm hoping I get a nice harvest of all of those combined to be able to put away some diced tomatoes. All right, so garlic, second round that's going to be harvested. I'll end up doing a test pull, but based on the signs of this garlic, the leaves that are yellowing, it's about time to pull them. I'm not crazy about the way that the plants have looked this year, and I took a chance planting them in these two little narrow cutout beds. Over the last couple of seasons that I've been growing in them, I've really had hit or miss success when it comes to what's growing and how well it does. So for instance, my cabbage did really well, but I've had like a tomato plant here and some other squashes, and they've not done the best. So I think it's a combination of the light that these spaces get, as well as I think the soil. So we're still working at it. I am pleased though with the growth of my melons here. The watermelon I have is crimson, and then I have mango melon with, I mean, it was one of the best melons I've ever had, at least in the US, and I've been chasing it since I grew it that first year because I've not been able to get kind of that same delicious melon or nice production. Let's talk about what's doing really, really well. So it's kind of crazy to think about talking, you know, how melons are doing, but also I have cabbage here. We have it next to summer squash. So when you look at these plants, think about how much room summer squash can take up. This is, I think it's Lemon Sun. It was gifted to me, and so I've never grown it before, but they're so cute. And then I have it next to Ford Hook zucchini. And so my summer squash has been hit or miss these last couple of seasons. It's so easy to get attacked by the squash vine borer, and that has been the bane to my summer squash existence, but we're still fighting. All right, so I have a sweet corn here. This is the second sowing of corn. So I have some other plants in the backyard, which you'll see in just a few. Then I have some mustards, I think, that are volunteering. We're gonna take those plants as baby leaves because once that heat gets those cool weather loving plants, they're not gonna be as tasty, at least not to my liking. Oh shoot, I forgot I have cantaloupe. So some of the logic I'm using is, all right, you're in June, you're sowing, well, this is last month, you're sowing melons. What's going to be a quick producer? And cantaloupe, a smaller melon, I found that it's going to produce and, you know, get ripe much quicker. It's also one of those plants that can ripen on or off the vine. Let's get to the backyard in a different way because I want to show you something that just makes me happy. It was last year this time that a raccoon around, actually a little bit later in the morning, showed itself and came along this, gangway, but I'm trying to be brave. These are clearly they're volunteers because I wouldn't have planted them there, but aren't we happy that they volunteered? I weeded recently and left them here. I love snapdragons and I love this color, and I actually have some seeds that I need to collect from last season. Look at that. The gardener who leaves her coffee. This is from this morning. So, although unfortunately I have been known to drink day-old coffee. All right. Can you hear the smile in my voice? I just love it here. All right, so over on Instagram and Facebook a couple of weeks back, we were talking about vining crops that I could put here. I went a different direction because I already picked up these vincas, which I really, really like. They won't exactly vine, but they'll get a little bit bushier. So these little kind of 3-tier pots, I bought these from Home Depot years ago. And I don't plant in them every season. It is a job to keep them watered because they're so small, but it fits the space this year. Bonny best again. So I've said this in past years. Since it's out in the wild and exposed, tomatoes can't be protected from the squirrels. Well, technically, I could rig something up. I'm trying to harvest those as green tomatoes. Wouldn't it be cool to have a plant that's just producing tomatoes for the purpose of green tomatoes? So that's the idea. Our container bench. So we have our series of herbs, basil, sage, candy stevia, chocolate mint, more basil, peppermint. We have our peppers here, mostly sweet, so things like banana peppers. I do have a couple of bell peppers, some cayenne peppers for heat, and then Scotch bonnet here on the end. So I love this pot. I have to figure out what to do because the paint sheds off of it and it rubs up against you, but it's in this corner, so I know it. I try to kind of stay clear of it, but I have sweet potato slips here, which should produce a couple of sweet potatoes. And then I have some of those cosmos, which I feel a little bit bad because I really started those cosmos. They were beautiful, and then I neglected them. And they just are getting planted within the last week. So our Vego raised bed, 32 inches tall. Yeah, so this has been a work in progress. So we did the hugel culture method, a take on it, and so I've had a lot of soil dropping, right? So more than half of this bed was like just sticks and tree limbs and things and actual shredded leaves. And so planted in it last August. Coming into this year, I added a couple more bags of soil, and it still dropped, and it will continue to drop in its life, right? Oh look, hold on, wait. So this plant is large enough for me to let these peppers go. And boy, is that a nice thing to see. Orange bale on one end. I think it's a regular Cali Wonder that's going to ripen to red on the other end. I did pull a couple of things. I have some parsley that I moved around. It's looking a little bit peaked. Some celery. This is some type of pepper. Look at that. Paprika pepper plant. And yeah, I need to work on this bed a little bit more. I direct sow, I think, some carrots here. That soil looks super duper dry. I want to make sure I keep it moist as those carrots try to germinate. We have 2 different eggplants. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go back in my notes to figure out what the eggplants are. One is gonna be white, one's gonna be purple. That's all I got for now. Here's the other pepper plant. No fruit yet. And then I dropped in some chard from the red lettuce that had bolted, summer. And then these onions look pretty good. We have a couple more squash. So this is Ford Hook zucchini. This is what it looks like, the one in the front yard that I mentioned. I couldn't remember the name of. So then we have carrots. This is the first sowing of carrots for the season. So pretty pleased with that. Oh gosh, so much more to cover. Yeah, so sweet corn again. What is it, knee high? This is definitely waist high. So this sweet corn is intermingling with the potatoes, and the potatoes are looking good. I actually have, you can see those cucumbers. It's a bushy variety, if we are to believe that that's a real thing. So that's what's going to grow in this A-frame. We have some potatoes here that are basically planted the traditional way in the soil. Then we have some Ruth Stout planted potatoes. I'm going to check to see if I need to come back in. I think I'm okay with how much mulch I have. This contraption is for the purpose of holding in the straw that I'm using for mulch here. Yeah. I've sprinkled in some granular fertilizer just before rain last week, but I don't know that it rained enough. So I'm going to come in and give that a good watering. And yeah, the hoops are just left over from kind of the last planting. They don't really serve a purpose other than when the bed is empty, I probably will add netting back to it. So I left the hoops there, with the exception of the ones closer to the corn because they were just giving the corn a hard time. Our containers here are looking good. Peppers and potatoes. So a mixture of peppers here, jalapenos, orange bell in those 2.5 gallon containers. I have Jimmy Nardello, I have jalapeno, GreenStalks. Super pleased. So if you're seeing this in just the first couple of days of this video being released, GreenStalks still has their 10th year anniversary sale going. It goes through July the 11th, and it is one of the bigger sales of the season. So I have my code and my link in the description. Betta, B-E-T-T-A, gets you $10 off of your purchase. That's on top of their sales prices. So all of the things are growing here. This was my intention, to mix and match things to see what does really well. So we have everything from kale to chard to parsley to sage to carrots to potatoes. Beans, I'm doing a mixture of different types of bush beans. For the beans, I'm really chasing which beans I prefer to grow, and more specifically which beans I prefer to eat, because they all kind of grow the same when it comes to a bush bean. I am super pleased thus far. These GreenStalks were planted. I started filling them with mostly transplants just about a month ago, and the growth has been amazing. All right, folks, I'm trying to be optimistic, but these onions don't look like the onions that did pretty well last year. So we'll say a garden prayer. We're not giving up. We talked about this when I planted them late. I don't know if that's it. I don't know if the depth I planted them in is problematic, but let's get to more positive. We'll see about those. I have some beets here. And then this is the pineapple tomato plant that needs to be tied up just a bit. And we have one more GreenStalk that's planted for summer with tumbling Tom tomato, celery, strawberries, and sweet potatoes. I saw the folks at GreenStalk do it last year, so I thought I'd give it a try. And then my main planting of sweet potatoes. They have absolutely greened up. You can see they are climbing along the soil line. That bit of celery, this will be the first celery that's available for harvest. I mean, technically, any of this can be eaten now, but it's putting some size on. I have Kentucky Wonder beans that are just starting to climb this trellis. We've had some challenges with the pole beans. Over here, I have one lone pole bean that survived. The others were eaten up by, you guessed it, roly-polies. Did direct sow some additional beans, but time is running short for pole beans here in Chicago. Look at this. See, a garden tour keeps you honest. I did not know that this had happened. Oh, I've never grown this before. It's a black strawberry. because my little tag said so. I just love it. All right, so then we have the Mad Hatter pepper, which just got dropped, putting on new leaves. I actually accidentally chopped the top of that off. Cherry tomatoes. Boy, does that make you happy. We have our collards. So what's very clear to me is the last few years that I've been buying the starts, which these have been bought from the store as well. The last few years I've been buying them, they have just said collards. It's very clear that they were not Georgia collards. Now that I have collards labeled Georgia collards, and I'm reminded of what those plants look like when I've grown them properly labeled in previous years. They're still collard greens, my favorites. Harvest early and often. That was my commitment. So I need to get in here and harvest this week. I need to do it. So since the container garden video, I switched things up along this little line, and really more so out of function. I have wanted to be able to grow in these containers. I've done it off and on over the years. It's one of those things, like, again, you have it, you want to use it, and I put them inside of these kind of plant holders, but I moved them over here. My intention originally was to have them on the far end, but when I realized that I oftentimes pull my hose down, and I basically count on these corners to be able to catch the hose, I want to make sure I'm not creating an environment where something can topple over easily. So potatoes have since popped up since we were last together. Corn, okra, tomatoes, and then I am connecting this just to add a little bit more security with bungee cords, which is the gardener's best friend. So strong winds or animals, it's going to take some real pulling and tugging for these to come out, and that's the intention. So you can see I have some of my starter pots here. I'm still trying to decide what to drop in these. I know, it's okay. So I was ready to sign off, and I realized I hadn't shown the bed, the first bed we planted in this year. You know what? It deserves being uncovered. Let's see it in all its glory. Okie doke. So, kale, chard. These leaves are so big. They are perfect for smoothies. Since they're a bit tattered, they wouldn't make the best for wraps. That cabbage plant's holding on. All right, remember the one we've been monitoring? Some of our lacinato kale. I've harvested the main heads of these, and so those are side shoots, which will be yummy. And then the cauliflower, we're waiting for it to put on a head, these two plants, and I've pulled a couple more broccoli plants. Still working to figure out the formula for broccoli. Very clearly, it's not planting it in May and harvesting it in June and July. So that's that's part of the formula. It's cool weather crop. But with that considered, I'm pretty pleased. So they're not huge heads. They're still tasty, which is going to be the primary goal, right? And so you'll see, like, basically the middle half of this bed. Now that I think about it, I'm talking out loud. Just go with me for a moment. So we had a couple of different ideas about what we do here. So our space here, everything eventually will be harvested, except we'll let the kale continue to grow and the chard. So soon enough, I say for sure by the time we get to the end of the month, we'll have an empty bed, right? Because the broccoli will come out like today with me. And then these cabbages are probably, I don't know, another month away. More of our beets. I'm telling you. So there's so much surprise when it comes to some of these things I'm seeing, because I'm seeing them for the first time with y'all. And I've had my head down trying to get these things planted. It's been, I don't know, I feel like about 2 months of getting various things planted, working on garden projects here and there. And so I see something like beets actually putting on the root. Again, we're going into a different mode now. This is less about the planting because we'll have less planting to do. We'll fill in some gaps, we'll fill in some holes, we'll get our fall plantings in, sneak it up on us. We'll do those things, but now it's caring for all the things that I've taken the time to grow. Now we're focused, on keeping our balance. One of the things that I love about this time of year is, like, this is quite literally, you get to reap the benefits of the seeds that you've sown. This is the beginning of when some of the struggles happen too. So it's going to heat up, right? That's what summer here does. We're going to face some pest pressure. You know, there may be some disease that we have to battle. It's my hope that we're all armed with the tools we need to be able to face those challenges. We'll be talking about that a bit more here on the channel as we go through the summer season, getting ready for the next growing season for fall. All right, so appreciate y'all spending some time with me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. And I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one.